Hey, it's my pleasure to welcome a returning guest back to the show, and that is James Altucher. When he was on a couple of years ago, we had a great conversation about his book at the time, a concept I very much support, which is choose yourself. And since then, he's developed a huge podcast following, The Altucher Show. He's a former hedge fund manager, knows a lot about the economy, and he's been looking into the epidemiology of the COVID-19 situation. He also lives in New York City. And he's the author of a bunch of books. I won't even go through all the titles, but there's so many. He's prolific. Anyway, it's great to have James Altucher back on the show. James, how you doing?
Jason, thanks so much. Thanks for having me back on, and I super appreciate it. It's too bad it's such unfortunate circumstances that bring us back together on the show, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is, that's for sure. But there's a lot of opportunities right now too. And whenever there's a crisis, like the Chinese say, crisis and opportunity are the same thing. Their thing is literally translated, crisis is opportunity riding the dangerous wind. It's kind of interesting.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Is
and
that
so
is that like the saying, the ancient curse, may you live in interesting times? Because it's
that's a
similar
little
type of concept.
different, but and they used to say that a lot during the Great Recession for sure, and so these are interesting times. Being in New York City, man, you're just on the forefront of it. So tell us kind of just the big picture of what's going on, what you're thinking. What you're interviewing a lot of people. Just what's the zeitgeist in the James Altucher world right now?
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up New York City in that, you between New York City and New Jersey, those two areas alone are more cases and sadly deaths than the other 48 states combined.
Hmm.
So my view when I hear the news and when I walk out and see what's happening on the street, I imagine it's probably very different from somebody from other parts of the country where maybe the shutdown is not as restrictive, or maybe there's just not as many cases or not as many deaths. Like, you take Georgia, for instance, right next to Florida, which is reopening a big portion of their economy today.
Hmm.
And they've had, what, 800 deaths out of a population of 10 million. Georgia itself has an economy in the tens of billions. So, it's a different perspective. Here, everyone is, I just feel this atmosphere of anxiety and fear and stress, and nobody wants to, everybody's locked down. And there was all these panicky headlines weeks ago. Oh, the hospitals are about to get overrun. So Trump sent the, what is it, the USS Comfort. The
Right.
Javits
The
Center got
ship.
turned into a
Yeah.
hospital.
Right.
I myself visited the 10 hospitals on Central Park just to see what was going on. They were empty. All of these places were empty. They never did overwhelm the hospital system.
That's
And
great. So they flattened the curve in time that we didn't overwhelm the hospitals. And interestingly, you say that, James, because being in New York, certainly you know about the conspiracy theories that are starting to float like crazy. And one is where they're getting people to crowdsource video of hospitals in their neighborhoods, right? And you see like these barricades set up for people to get in line, and nobody's there. Now I don't know how real or fake this stuff is. I just know it's interesting. Thoughts on
yeah,
that?
I mean, but before the peak, I went out to do a little bit of that crowdsourcing myself just to see what
Hmm.
was going on.
Yep.
There was nobody anywhere.
Yep.
And I spoke to people who were coming in and out of the hospital. I spoke to doctors. I spoke to priests who were coming in and out. And, and like, thank God, I'm not even saying like, see, you were wrong. It's nothing. Like, okay, they took a worst case scenario and they wanted to be cautious and,
Hmm.
and take
Yeah.
every precaution.
And that's
But, but
good. That's good.
but I
And
do
it should
think,
be.
though, this speaks to the larger issue of, you know, we made, and I say we, the government and the population made huge, huge multi-trillion dollar decisions off of mathematical models that not once were correct.
Hmm.
They weren't even close to correct.
Right.
Like back in January, early February, there were newspaper articles saying around the world 140 million people might die. That was the first article I ever saw about this.
Hmm.
And then, I had a report out of either Imperial or Harvard or both that said there would be millions of deaths in the US, and up to 10 million deaths in the US was the first number I heard. And then it kept coming down, kept coming down, and every single model was wrong. March 25th, the IHME came out with a model that said there would be 60,000 hospitalizations in New York City alone by April 1st, just
Hmm.
6 days later. Well,
Right.
6 days later, there were 12,000 hospitalizations. They were 80% off and a model they had made just 6 days earlier. And these were all the scientists we were relying on to make multi-trillion-dollar decisions about shutting down people's livelihoods and
Hmm.
careers and all the deaths and stress and collateral fatalities that ended up resulting. If you're in stage 3 liver cancer and you wanted to see if you had stage 4, that was considered an elective procedure, so you couldn't do it.
Hmm.
So you still can't do it. So this is creating a problem for the entire system. And
Yeah.
everyone will say, "Oh, are you choosing the stock market over your grandma's life?"
Right.
No, that's not it at all.
Yeah.
Like, people are suffering. Like, there's
Right.
calls to the Bronx for child abuse hotlines are
Hmm.
6 times higher.
Yeah.
Even in Indiana, the call,
Suicide hotlines are 800% higher.
yeah,
Calls to suicide hotlines. Yeah.
it's insane. So I really just, who knows what the right decision was, but
Yeah.
everybody was scared. But I wish the media hadn't fanned the flames of that hysteria, because hysteria now is turning into history,
Right.
and hopefully we climb out of this. But yeah, so that's a long answer. But also in terms of the economy, I think we're we're going from a period of great uncertainty to a little bit more certainty,
Hmm.
which is that the economy will reopen. The stimulus packages now too have been passed, plus the Federal Reserve stimulus, and the virus seems to have peaked in the U.S. And maybe there'll be a second wave, maybe not. That's part of the unknowns. But we know some things now for certain that we didn't know even like 3 or 4 weeks ago. So that's a good thing. But now going into this new abnormal, I'll call it, is there's a lot of uncertainty too, which is what industries will collapse, because there's going to be a few. And we don't know about the second wave of the virus, but now that we have a lot of data about the virus, hopefully we can say, well, okay, we don't have to shut down the entire economy this time, and we'll see. But there's been definitely been a lot of interesting data about the economy.